Hello there, and welcome to Literary as Feck with me, Clive Davis, and him over there,
Nicholas O'Shea Khan.
How's it going, Nick?
Well, pretty good. The houses around here haven't started climbing on top of each other and groaning in their own house language.
Right.
The seas have not turned to blood. And basically things are as normal.
Now then, I think, judging by that response, you've been reading ALFRED KUBIN's The Other Side, haven't you?
Yes.
Which is handy, because I wanted to talk to you about it today.
That's an incredible piece of synchronicity, Clive. Fantastic.
How do we do these things? So yeah, this edition of Literary as Feck, we will be talking about ALFRED KUBIN's 1908 novel, The Other Side, which, yes, a first read for you?
Yes, yeah. So this is this is the question I have for you, Clive. This seems like a very surprising blind spot for me, that I have not heard of this person before, because primarily he's a visual artist, right? And he only seems to have written this one novel, which is quite incredible. And then there's also a movie that was made out of this as well. And so I'm surprised that I'd never heard of him before, and I'd like to know how you did hear about Mr. KUBIN.
I equally, when I actually got around to reading this and finding out about ALFRED, which we'll get into in a moment, and watching the film as well, I was also floored by that sense of, how did I not know about any of this, especially at least the movie, you know, how has this avoided me for so long? But my way into this was, I think, a couple of years ago now. My friend Johannes Schoner, who wrote the excellent Trash Film Roadshow book for Head Press, and the invaluable North Korea cinema book, which is McFarland, I think, two books which you should definitely own, and who lives just north of here in Saitama, sent me...
Sorry, that does beg the question of why we haven't done one of those and had him on. So maybe that's something to kick down the road a little bit.
I have actually considered having him on a few of the different podcasts and YouTube videos that I did. Unfortunately, he has not a very good setup in his home in terms of he's got a yeah, so it would...
He's using a 1982 Tandy that doesn't actually connect to the internet.
Pretty much, and I've chatted with him on his webcam thing, and it's like, yes, staring through like a film of mud or something, and the audio is so it's a matter of getting in a room with him with a recording device. But I am very keen to have him on talking about whatever he chooses to talk about. So that will happen at some point. But anyway, Johannes Schoner recommended, I think it was the film Traumstadt or Dream City, because it turned up on YouTube, and it actually still is on YouTube as well in entirety, and with English subtitles. And he said, oh, check out this film and also the book that it's based on. And I put it on my list of things to get around to, which sometimes takes me a little while, but I do at some point. And then we needed a bit of filler for this show, because the thing we were supposed to be talking about,
I'll never finish reading it.
Yeah.
It'll be teased for years on the show that someday we'll talk about a book called Phantom Africa. And the Phantom episode.
There we go. Yes. And so this seemed like actually the Kindle seemed like a brisker, I mean, it's a fairly brisk read, but it seemed like a brisker read than it actually is. So it was something I thought we could fit in, because it was on the long list, fit in the interim quickly, something you could read, you know, but it wasn't quite as short as advertised, but, you know, doable in the time given.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm quite pleased that you're quite slow in reading Phantom Africa, because that invariably kind of knocked this higher up
yeah,
the read list.
Mhm.
Whereas I was planning to get around to it, but I didn't necessarily have a sense of urgency about reading it. But now that I have read it, I'm like, yeah, thank you very much, Johannes and Tardy Nick for
making us both read this
because it's
earlier than
fairly phenomenal book. So we should probably a bit of background. Yeah, so ALFRED KUBIN, who was born in what was then Bohemia, I guess, in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. His dates are 1877 to 1959. His three sizes are, actually, I don't know those. So yeah, primarily an illustrator and a printer, and apparently an occasional writer, but I don't know what that means, because this is the only novel he wrote, right?
Yeah.
The Other Side from 1908. Apparently a big influence on Kafka's The Castle.
Yep.
And we should also mention as well that it's illustrated as well, right? And apparently the illustrations were originally meant for an edition of Gustav Meyrink's The Golem.
Yes, yeah. But
which
they do seem very applicable. Some of them I wonder if they were created specifically for this, but a lot of, you see scenes where you're like, oh yeah, I could see how that would work in either.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I'm wondering if you could talk to this a little bit, because I know who he is and I know what the book is and I know about him, and I've seen his drawings and they could certainly be influenced by KUBIN, but I don't know about his writing. Mervyn Peake and Gormenghast, right?
Yes. Supposedly.
Link there. Would you? Because you've read Gormenghast books, haven't you?
Yeah, Jen's more. I think I've seen the TV series. Jen's read the books. My wife's read the books. But she actually watched the movie with me today. And after that, she is very keen to read the book. And I was reading her some stuff from near the end of the book, and she was like, but then she immediately made those connections to Gormenghast when watching the movie. Okay,
interesting. Because I know of Gormenghast, but I've never actually got around to. I looked up some of. I ran a Google search for Mervyn Peake's art, and some of that certainly does seem. So that's another thing as well. Is do yourself a favor, run a Google search viewer for ALFRED KUBIN's. His art is
yes. So this is the thing that maybe one of the things that surprised me a lot was to seeing his art. Right, it's mostly black and white. A lot of it is engravings or kind of more sketches or sort of watercolors. He did do some oil paintings, but he apparently wasn't as fond of that later on. But he sits at this really strange juncture where he's roughly like contemporary of the Expressionists. So like people like Edvard Munch and everyone remembers the Scream, right?
Macaulay Culkin.
Yes, Macaulay Culkin's famous painting, The Scream. And so, but he prefigures, and so symbolism as well, like Odilon, Redon, and just people like that. But then, what the work really looks like is Proto-Surrealism. Like you can see Dali before Dali, and you can see H.R. Giger before H.R. Giger. And if you've seen a lot of like Giger's, like that gray tony, just more like the sketchy work that he did, it's all there. It's like he's like this weird map to a whole strain of art that comes later on. But I had no idea that he was this bridge.
Something a little bit more sinister version of Edward Gorey as well.
Yeah,
a little bit.
And apparently he did do. And this part made sense to me when they mentioned in his biography that he did illustrations for Edgar Allan Poe.
Right.
That kind of the decadence of Poe.
Right.
Right. But this it's turned up to 12 in this.
Yeah, you can imagine him sitting down to draw the things, but wearing like a once expensive but now torn and mud splattered like velvet.
Yes,
waistcoat.
So so yeah, the art's amazing, and then this book is like, and I guess, you know, it sounds like he just wrote it in like one great gush of like 12 days of writing or something like that. It was, you know, because it does seem like stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
Crazy. But, you know, to my mind, if I had to, like, I was trying to think of like, so when I was trying to describe the book to Jen, I was like, to me, it feels like this weird, unholy mashup of elements of H.P. Lovecraft, elements of Philip K. Dick, and elements of somebody else whose name I'm not remembering right now, which is frustrating. But anyway,
but obviously
it had
all
this
stuff that came later.
And Kafka, Kafka, right?
Yeah.
And all of which comes later.
Right.
So like you can see this kind of this DNA of weird, and so you mentioned that this is used in a book about weird fiction, or a survey of weird fiction, as maybe one of the first touchstones. And it does feel a bit like maybe a Rosetta Stone.
It does.
Of
it really does.
Weird fiction.
Which is why I was so pleased to finally read it, because it wasn't just that it was a good. It feels like something of an epoch, right, about it. And it feels like, oh, hang on now, why is this not? And I don't think it is just you and me. And obviously there are, you know, we're not the first people to stumble across this. There are people, some people whose names came up were, for instance, I haven't read enough of her work to say whether it's right, but some people think maybe Angela Carter was very much influenced by this book, and a bunch of other kind of interesting names, you know, people that we'd be more familiar with. So there are people who are clued in, but I feel not necessarily as many as should be. I still think it's a little bit of a well-kept secret, this book, right?
Yeah. So I had a conversation, well, actually, and it's mentioned in that Edgar Winter documentary about Sparks, but like Sparks are a band that come up in anytime musicians get together and start talking about music, Sparks come up. But anytime normal people get together anywhere, Sparks don't come up, you know, because they're still they're a musician's band, in the same way that like there are certain stand-up comedians who are known as the ones that other comedians go to see.
Comedians,
right?
Yeah.
And so this guy feels like he was some sort of a writer, or an artist, somebody who seems to be known within a smaller circle, but of people who maybe go on to do great and important things.
I suppose as well is because it's just the one book, right? There's not a canon of work, and even though it's fine, it's not necessarily a book that's going to get literary types all worked up because of the nature of its prose or anything like that, right? Like it's not necessarily, it doesn't stand out in that way. It's more just the ideas and the imagery more than anything.
I guess should we get into briefly discussing what the story is?
Right. Yeah. Well,
what happens? I don't know because I don't know what it's about exactly.
No.
Talk about what happens.
I'm going to give it I'll give it a brief shot at it, and then we go from there. Just jump in. So basically, the way it begins is there's an artist and his wife who are invited by an old school friend of his.
Right, through a third party.
Yes.
So not directly involved.
It's Grouch. Is it Grouch or something?
Yes.
Not the one from Sesame Street. But,
no.
But that would be an interesting. Sesame Street does.
Yeah.
At the side.
I would think Henson actually would be a good person to attempt this.
Go to Big Bird's Dreams or something. Anyway, so they are invited to go to what seems to be a newly formed state or city or town by a former school friend of his, and he's come into a huge deal of money somehow. Well, they do explain something to do with rescuing a wealthy Chinese man's wife from drowning or something, right? And then, being taken under this man's wing, and then when they both died, he inherited this large fortune. and then he's set up his own town or city where apparently, and there's thousands of people already living there, and you're allowed. The idea is that you're allowed to dream, right? You're allowed to dream, and you're allowed to exercise total autonomy, and you don't necessarily have to worry about the creature comforts of life. Everything will kind of be provided for you. So he invites this artist and his wife to travel there, and he even gives them an advance of cash to cover their travel. And so they seem to go, I'm not sure exactly, I guess they go from Germany across, they go through Hungary at one point, right? Because he says some unflattering things about Hungarian people. And then I guess they kind of detour up into, they go into the corner of Russia at one point, right? And then they seem to be going more to somewhere like Persian or Middle. So I was trying to look at the map. I was trying to figure out where dreams might be. And
make a lot of sense to me.
Like
Asia,
Kazakhstan, maybe somewhere like
somewhere on the Asian continent.
But yeah, but somewhere in that Stani region, right? But anyway, and they turn up, and it turns out to be a very old world kind of European looking, like Prague or something, which it is in the film.
Yes.
I
mean, one of the things that the film couldn't put across, but it's a wonderful image, is when they first arrive at the city walls, because they seem like they're gargantuan in the book. Like it's just this massive wall in the middle of this misty nowhere, and they kind of go under through the gate, and there's this sense of, it's funny. Sento Chihiro is like the family friendly version of this in some ways.
Spirited Away for our English speakers.
I had that idea of like when they go through and they're in this world that has its own kind of dream logic.
Right.
Yes, and all of the buildings. So this fascinated me because
I wonder if Hayao Miyazaki might have read the other side. Obviously, there's no way I'm making this as a family friendly film.
No, because he seems to have been very interested in European literature generally, and in literature of the weird, and in stuff that's fairy tale
era, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if he is aware. But a couple of years back, and I think we talked about this, Jen and I were driving back through the Rocky Mountains from Kelowna, British Columbia, back to Calgary. And my friend Tavis had said, you need to stop at this place called Three Valley Gap. And I thought it is a place where you end up stopping anyway. It's in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, way up there in this kind of like, it's a place where if you get snowed in, it's like you're stuck there for weeks kind of a thing. In winter time. Yeah. And there's a little kind of a lake, a little mountain lake there. And there's this huge, like mega hotel up there that is very shining like the Overlook Hotel. It's just massive thing. And there's nobody in there. Like, it just seems like it's just, I don't know how they make money, but the guy who owned it for a long time basically built this town out of bric-a-brac. And so he basically bought up all of these old churches that were kind of dilapidated and falling down, and these like old schoolhouses and stuff, and just moved them all into the mountains and clustered them all in this big space, but did nothing to kind of shore them up or like repair them. They've just been left, and stuff like tons of trains and planes and and it's all just left out to just rot and rust and go back into the earth. Wow. And you can pay money to walk around in this environment, and it's totally amazing. And you'll walk into a place, and there's holes in the ceiling, the water's coming through, and there's like copies of newspapers from like when Charles married Di or whatever, that are just like melting, and you're like, I feel like that should probably like be in like under plastic. Like it really for a collect, and that's why I think what Tavis sent me, because we both have a bit of that collecting mania and that kind of like hoarder sensibility. But like here's where it goes, like it punches all of those panic buttons for you, because like, oh, I don't ever want to be this crazy, and also why aren't they taking care of all this stuff? Like, why is it all just
right?
like,
I'll just have a chat with a guy. I'm wondering if he's looking for people to help him, and you suddenly find yourself moving to 3, 5. Yeah.
But anyway, so in the novel, basically, that's what's happened in a way. All of these buildings have been moved, evidently brick by brick, and rebuilt, you know, in their various. But then again, they're all kind of, they haven't chosen the nicest buildings, or it's just stuff, or maybe even they've deliberately been chosen because they're slightly odd. Because that seems to be, he's curating a collection of strange buildings and strange people and strange.
That reminds me as well of Thurston Moore telling the story about he went around some musician friend's house once, and he had like loads of super rare old punk 7-inches, like really, really, really rare. But he just didn't look at, and there's something there on the floor, some 7-inch that he's been looking for decades, and like his dog's chewing on it, and just like, you gotta give me that, and he's like, no, that's my record. You can't have that.
Yeah, anyway, so sorry I interrupted you, but basically, yes, the buildings themselves have been moved from Europe.
Right, yes, brick by brick, it seems. Like Nicolas Cage by a Scottish castle. And
there we go. That's who we would cast, obviously, as Patera.
Klaus Patera, yes.
Klaus Patera, who is the guy who is,
the friend who's so they turn up at this place, and immediately, so they're given a place to live, and it's a strange, it's a very difficult book to talk about, because basically what happens is, and I guess we'll jump about and talk about particular things but basically it goes sour very, very quickly.
Very fast.
I mean, it takes a while. At first, there's a certain amount of them getting used to the weirdness of the place. So, for example, the whole place seems to be shrouded in some kind of weird fog, or like or just a haze. So you never see the sun, and you never see the moon. You never see the stars. It's always just kind of.
Yeah, there's really only one season as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's just an endless gray, and autumnal kind of feel.
There's people from all over the world there as well, but mostly German.
Yep.
And it does seem to have a kind of remnant of a class system. I'm guessing this is because is the class system that people brought with them, maybe from Europe, because obviously. So the other weird thing is as well. So and everyone wears these old-timey clothes as well. But
yeah, you're not allowed. They actually have their possessions taken away because they're too new. They're kind of replaced with older, grubbier possessions.
But specifically as well, their financial system is totally
random.
Well, it seems to be like a form of tokenism, right? So it's like you go into a shop and it doesn't matter how much anything costs. You just give them a coin and you walk out.
And you probably won't get the thing that you asked for. That's the other thing. No. You'll go in for a map, but you'll come out with a candlestick holder.
Yeah, well, my favorite one was they buy some lamb cutlets only to get home to find a bunch of old used mouse traps with like some mouse's tails still attached to some of them, which I thought was fantastic. In the movie, they make it
cheese rinds. It's a huge box of cheese rinds, like massive.
Yeah. So that's the thing is, I think as long as you give a little something, but then don't expect to actually get the thing, at some point there'll be a bait and switch. This alone I found fascinating.
Yep.
And then so there's all antiques. To your point as well about being, there's a part of the book where he's like, oh my god, this place is just loaded with fucking amazing vintage. Only I could somehow smuggle them out or get people from the outside to know about this, I could, make a mint. But to your point, no, they're not going anywhere, right? It's and so and there seems to be some sort of weird hive mind at work as well, right? Where there are these sudden, like, I don't know, psychic shocks or something that just poof, out of nowhere floor everyone, right? And they just end up lying around on the floor or going crazy or running around. And they have a maid who seems to be a different person every time they see her.
Yes,
but still posing as the maid.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
She changes height, stature, sex, everything.
Yep.
Yes, and they're trying to figure, and there's always scary noises all the time, like in the background, some weird noises are going on, and they don't know where they come from.
Yeah, it does have the logic of, I mean, ultimately it has the logic of a nightmare overall, but in that part it has that kind of logic of that creeping. That's where the Lovecrafting comes in, that creeping, insidious feeling of like oppression and kind of just like, yeah, it's just like the shadow over Innsmouth or something like that, just, you know, going to this kind of slightly rotting, slouching kind of town where, and you know that something's not quite right. But they do make a genuine effort at the beginning to try to fit. And he gets his job quite quickly. Right? He gets a job as a newspaper illustrator quite early in the story. And he doesn't. I noticed that in the movie they never touch on that. He never gets.
No.
He never gets a job.
Well, there's a lot to cram in, right? And yeah. So there's a certain kind of shabby glamour to the place, I guess, right? And but yes, even when it seems to be at its peak, it's a place that functions. Yeah, like you said. What really impresses me about this book as well is it's difficult to pull off nightmare dream logic in any other form other than your dreams, right? Because in a dream, it makes sense. Like when you're talking to someone in a dream and they suddenly transform into a totally different person, yet they are the same person. And whereas previously you were sitting in a tree and talking, but now you're in a nuclear bunker when you just turn around, and the person you're talking to is now a mouse, and you're now a mouse, and all that makes sense.
But it's all seamless somehow.
Yeah, it makes sense in a dream. So to kind of try and straddle the line between giving you that sense, that true sense of dream logic, but also having, because if you put that in a book, it's just gibberish and bollocks, and you throw it away, right? But this straddles that line where there is just enough of a narrative. And I can imagine some people not getting on with this book at all, actually, because it would just seem like a catalogue of weirdness and grotesquerie and perversity and things you wish you hadn't read.
Yes. At the further you get,
pages and pages and pages. Right?
But I do think one scene that I think comes quite early in the book and also is done very well in the movie, actually. It's the scene where he attempts first to get an audience, because part of the story is, and this is the part where it reminds me a little bit of The Castle, right, by Kafka.
Right,
this idea
bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, these layers and layers of bureaucracy, and he's trying to get and meet and talk to his old school chum, who is the guy who runs the place, basically, or, you know, is the nominal, you know, the great leader. And you just can't get past, and that kind of very comedy sort of scene of the guy telling him all of these different, you know, you need a reference for your father-in-law providing, you know, only if he has had syphilis or something else. Like there was like this bizarre, lengthy list of, you know.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? If you think about this book that as maybe a thing that different people plundered different ideas from. Yeah, that element. Kafka took that bit and maybe left the other stuff behind, and then the other writers took that bit and left the bureaucratic stuff behind. Or it's just,
you have to wonder if Terry Gilliam wasn't aware of the movie and the book as well, just because I was thinking if anybody would have maybe done a good job of maybe trying to put across the last quarter of the book, which is based like really untranslatable to cinema outside of animation.
That's exactly what I wrote in my review of it. I was like, as soon as I read it and I was going to watch the film, I was like, how the fuck are they going to pull this off?
The last 25% of this, the last quarter of that book is madness. But what I loved, the first moment where I truly was just like, oh yeah, yes, was the point, and it's not in the movie, which is frustrating, is when the guy who is sort of the and he's in the movie, the sort of the slightly fey hairdresser salon guy
right. I think I know where
has an assistant in the
Right.
book who is a monkey.
Yes.
And at first I was like, am I misunderstanding this? Am I misreading this? Is it like, is he like a monkey? But no,
Right. No, it is a monkey. Yeah.
he's a monkey
Yeah.
with a kind of like, but possibly, I just picture again, like straight out of, I guess, Edgar Allan Poe, like a monkey with a straight razor,
Right.
you know, shaving people and stuff. And I
That's
was a little sad.
Ed
I felt
well,
like they
isn't it?
could have done that in the movie. I felt like that was a missed
Yeah.
opportunity.
The other bit as well, because there's so much in it, there's so many moments, and you do. I am going to read this book again
Yes.
and again and again. I think just because I couldn't catalog it all in one go, and there's certain bits that jump out. There's like a bit where everything's starting to look. So like we said at the beginning, he's trying to give the place a shot and trying to acclimatize to his environment, but it's just, yeah, it's overwhelming after a certain point. But there's a bit where he's having a bad day, and then a kindly old man sits down with him in like the pub or whatever, and he says,
Oh yes,
this guy seems normal. But then he starts talking about his dust mite collection.
yes, he's cataloging them.
I thought, this is, and then he's gone, and he comes back later, but he doesn't mention the dust mite. And I thought, oh man, I could have read entire book about this man and his dust mite.
That's right. Agreed. But again, there's where like that obviously hits me in various different places because like
dust mite collection.
Because I am a guy who might start collecting dust mites at some point, absolutely. And I think it reminded me again of like there's that Philip K. Dick, like the aphids stuff. You know, there's this kind of like, I guess. And then when you watch the movie, it does come across that
aphid.
Yeah, that like that Patera has like curated a collection of buildings and objects and people and all of it. It's a giant cabinet of curiosities, and he's chosen people because they're interesting or strange or they're kind of monomaniacs or whatever. Like they're all. And this is just another wonderful example of like, this is just a kindly eccentric as opposed to a scary eccentric, which there are also those kinds in the book as well.
Speaking of Cabinet of Curiosities, I'd love to see Jan Schwankmeyer have a go at doing a version of this.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, so then, but things start to turn bad, I suppose, is when his wife ends up getting sick,
gets sicker and sicker, and
eventually dies. And spoiler. I mean, this is not a book that's really going to be spoiled by spoilers. And then it seems, I don't know. It's interesting. It then turns into. There seems to be some kind of, I don't know, like a psychic illness or something, and
there's the whole sleeping. I guess he was pretty inspired by fairy tales as well, and there is a fairy tale logic to this as much as there's a dream logic, right? And so there is almost a sleeping beauty sickness that just takes everybody out at a certain point, and then when they start waking up, the whole place has been overrun.
Well, then it turns into David Cronenberg's Shivers for a while.
Yep,
like that's what it made me think of that, and you're thinking, oh, this must be kind of getting towards the end point of, but no, that's kind of just the beginning, and then it goes
beginning of the
beyond
madness.
Shivers into more cannibalistic kind of territory for a bit, and then it goes, and then beyond that, it kind of lost me in terms of me trying to make it up, because it's just wave after wave after wave of apocalyptic shit.
Yes, it's apocalyptic entropy. And so I've never read a book that so accurately shows entropy.
Yeah, and just when you think, oh, can't get much worse, and then it levels up, right? And then for a while it even turns into like a kaiju movie, right? With
near the end, that stuff is fantastic. And I might want to read some of that out loud because it's so good. In a moment. But what, like, I was thinking, it reminded me of like if you've ever seen like those time lapse things of like a bowl of fruit suddenly rotting, but it's not suddenly, right? But it's but like growing this like fur, and that was what the entire last quarter of the book was like. The entire city just like there's these descriptions of going into places and suddenly everything's kind of like just covered in in dust and grime and slime and insect larvae, and just like the stuff is, and you know, in the movie, in fairness, like I was surprised. I was like, how are they going to be able to do this? But they did put it across. The part where the guy starts poking at his house and sand just starts kind of pouring out of the wall. Like,
the movie very wisely decided, like, okay, there's no way we can actually represent what's exactly in the book. It's just impossible. So let's just do our interpretation of it as best we can. And to be fair, it worked, and especially considering that we had just read the book and then watched it, that would be peak disappointment if you're going to be disappointed by an adaptation.
Yes.
But the fact that we went straight from the one to the other and weren't disappointed says a lot, I think. For the film.
I think it's very true to the spirit of the book, and and you said it wisely avoids the things it can't do, and it does put across the apocalyptic stuff effectively. It's not as visionary and hallucinatory as what happens in the book.
But like you said,
like the last bunch of the movie, when the buildings are just collapsing over and over again.
We'll talk about that because I was wondering about that. But yeah, but back to the book for a minute. It kind of, I think it only stops short. I mean, it does a little bit. It hints towards it. It doesn't quite go totally cosmic, but it gets closer.
Oh, yeah.
When it gets to like talking about like one of the monsters is.
Shall I just read that part?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the part that I like to read. It's so mad. You know, I mean, so there is a part that just quickly, the one of my favorite parts is, and we're quite near the end here. The cottages started to move. The windmills struck out at the intruders with their sails. The unkempt hair of the thatched roofs bristled. The tents bellied out as if they had winds inside. The trees grabbed at the people with their branches, the poles bent like reeds. Finally, the little temples and houses climbed up on top of each other and spoke strange words in a dreadfully loud, audible, rasping voice, a dark, incomprehensible language of houses. What the hell is the dark, incomprehensible language of houses?
Just the image of these houses suddenly like, oh, just climbing up on top of each other. It's fantastic.
And then there's this part where Patera, who is, I guess we should bring up Hercules Bell quickly, and maybe before I read this, because I have a few questions. So he's called the American for most of the book. He shows up halfway through. Yeah,
he's kind of keen on usurping Patera, right? Taking over this place, and he's very American, I guess. He
doesn't like the shabby old world kind of stuff, and he doesn't like the decay and the rest of it. He's offended by it.
Yeah, it's a waste of, I guess, potential or resources.
Yeah,
he's the new world, right? He's the new world.
Well, that's what I wondered how much of the book, like at that point, does become this weird metaphor or whatever for the old European ways and their stodginess and their versus this dynamic, which is why what happens in this moment is so amazing. What the two of them kind of turn into in this final moment. So they're increasingly involved in this weird struggle that kind of takes place by proxies, but finally at the end, this is the kaiju moment, I guess, right? Yes. The city of Pearl was back where it had always been. Patera came out of the palace, inhaled deeply and so noisily the sound reached even me, then stretched and started to grow taller and taller. Already his head was on a level with me. He could have used the whole palace as his footstool. His clothes split and dropped away. His face was covered by his long flowing locks. His huge feet parted the streets like grass, and he bent down over the station, picked up an engine and blew on it like a mouth organ. But he was still growing in all directions, and soon this toy was too small for him. So he broke off the great tower and sent tremendous trumpet blasts ringing around the sky. His naked body was terrible to behold. Now he expanded to even vaster proportions and dug up a volcano with a spiral of the earth's granite intestine hanging from it. He set this gigantic instrument to his lips, and the booming reverberations made the universe tremble. He stood erect, his upper body wreathed in cloud, his flesh looking as if it was made of mountains. He seemed to be filled with rage. I saw him kneel down in the distance, flocks of birds becoming entangled in his long hair. He waded out into a sea that scarcely came up to his thighs, yet overflowed and flooded the world. He trawled through the water with his huge hands, catching ships and writhing sea monsters, crushing them up and throwing them away again. He trod mountains underfoot so that they splattered like mud, and great rivers poured into his footsteps. He was determined to destroy everything. He squirted a stream of boiling urine everywhere, even over the most remote mountain huts, scalding the unsuspecting inhabitants in the steam and killing them. He's like, what the fuck? That's amazing. He stamped around in the yellowish gray flood, his excited body wreathed in clouds of smoke. He threw fistfuls of people for miles until they fell in a shower of corpses. Then a mighty mountain range, which stretched from east to west, began to move. I saw that it was the sleeping American. Patera threw himself full length into his enemy. As they wrestled, the sea boiled up in waves and as high as a house. But I knew I was in the hand of my own fate and stayed calm. It was an ocean of blood spread out below as far as the eye could see. The hot purple waves rose higher and higher until the pink foam of the breakers washed over my feet. Nauseating fumes went up my nose. The sea of red drew back and rotted before my very eyes. The blood grew thicker, darker, blacker, with occasional rainbow patches of iridescence. Often the viscous liquid would part, revealing a seabed covered with soft excrement that gave off a dreadful stench. But no, I'll just go on to the part because I think it's not too far before. Hang on, no, maybe I'll skip to where the part where. Yes, okay. So they struggle, they fight. At one point, Patera just turns into a giant head. He crawls into a ball and then reforms as a head. Oh yeah, sorry. And then there's the part where a monster's body too huge to distinguish its various parts rolled and writhed all over the earth. The shapeless being taking on protean characteristics. Millions of tiny, ever-changing faces formed on its surface, all prattling, singing, shouting at the same time until they were sucked back in again. Like that just sounds like something out of an insane anime like Tetsuo, you know, Akira. Anyway, and then yes, now far out in the ocean, I saw the American, who had expanded to the same terrifying size as Patera. The eyes in his imperious head flashed like diamonds. He was wrestling with himself in a demonic paroxysm, if that's how you say that word. The huge ridges of the swollen veins in his neck twisting in a network of blue. He was trying to throttle himself, but to no avail. With all his might, he beat his breast. It sounded like a steel cymbal. The thunderous booming almost deafened me. Then this gigantic monster rapidly shriveled up, only its penis refusing to shrink, so that finally he was stuck like an inconspicuous parasite to an impossibly large phallus. The parasite dropped off as if it was a dried up wart, and the fearsome member crawled over the earth like some immense snake, wriggled like a worm and grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared into one of the underground passages of the dream realm.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah, that's just a sample as well, right? And then there's even after that, there's this whole thing about like some subterranean worm tentacled creature thing that stretches out into all the bedrooms and stuff, and everything. Hang on, isn't the city like in bits? Like, so it's weird. It seems that the city seems to kind of almost reform and get destroyed, reform. It's at this point it's gone totally off the rails, and it's just into this realm of like you said, just head first stream of consciousness, like it's as close to just writing as you can get while still remaining, you know,
using words, using language.
Yeah. No, it's I can't think of anything else. I mean, we've talked about how many things are influenced by it, or how many things it might be like, or how many things it reminds us of, but I can't think of anything quite like this.
No.
It stands alone, doesn't it? The other side by Alfred KUBIN.
I would wonder too if another person who I'd be surprised wasn't aware of this on some level would have been Alejandro Jodorowsky.
Right.
It feels like it should be good, given his background in surrealism and, you know, his connection to
yes, and Arrabal as well, and who I recommended to you before the book Jocko's Birthday, Roland Topor as well, right? That whole panic movement, and
But I don't think I've ever read anything like this before. Really, this is pushing some of those things to the furthest, and yet it's so early.
Yeah.
You know.
No, it's quite the Yeah, and then you're not even considering the artworks that it might. I mean, there's Goya, Hieronymus Bosch.
Yeah.
No,
Pasolini, like, you know, the dream director. Although I have to say, the guy who did direct it, maybe we'll talk about the movie in a second a bit more, but like, he did a great job. But you know, you can't help but think about a dream team of like, what would Pasolini's version of this look like? What would Jodorowsky's version of this look like? What would, you know, Terry Gilliam's version look like? And what would the Japanese animated version look like? You know,
right. No, yeah, it's definitely definitely one of my
and you know who else would be great with this?
Companies of late, I think, is this book, without a doubt.
I would love to see also a manga adaptation by the Spiral guy.
Koji Suzuki.
Yeah. I think, because he has that very kind of gray tony, kind of overworked drawing style.
Or that guy you did is a Suehiro, the guy you did like what's it called, Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show or whatever. That.
Yes, yeah. I could definitely see.
Maybe. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So yes, they did attempt in 1973. There's a West German Traumstadt, or Dream City, directed by Johannes Schaaf, who was someone I don't know anything about. Apparently from Stuttgart originally, and known for being a theatre and opera director. That's apparently his main, what he's mainly known for. He's quite well known in that world. I suppose his most well-known film, which I haven't seen, but I'm keen to see, was a film called Trotta from 1971, which was an adaptation of Joseph Roth's novel, The Emperor's Tomb.
Okay.
And he co-wrote this with one of the co-stars, Rosemary Fendell, and someone called Russell Parker. Rosemary Fendell plays the wife, Anna, right?
Okay.
And the main guy is Per Oscarsson. And yes, so the other thing I know,
not Chris Christopherson, as I was like,
no,
there was the Chris Christopherson Takes a Terrible Holiday. Another title for this movie.
Yes, aka Chris Christopherson is Russell Parker, I noticed just as we're looking at connections as well. Russell Parker seems to have been a cinematographer who shot a documentary called Torre Biola, which sounds kind of interesting. Sounds up in your wheelhouse, actually. It's a 1975 documentary about a Portuguese cooperative farm.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought, that sounds like a
yep.
It sounds like a Nick.
I would give that a go.
Yes.
Yep.
And apparently the director of that film, as we're going by interesting connections, was a guy called Thomas Harlan, who was the son of notorious Nazi-era director Veit Harlan, who made a documentary Jew-Sus.
Oh, geez. Wow. Youch.
So a lot of interesting connections there. Anyway.
So, and actually, funny enough, speaking, so KUBIN himself was unsurprisingly designated degenerate art by the Nazis.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
To be honest, it probably would have been dubbed degenerate art by most people. I don't think you have to be a Nazi to disapprove.
No. Yeah. So anyway, yes, his stuff was considered consigned to the dustbin of history by the Nazis. Although, like they often did, they had no problem with stealing it and selling it to make money. So a number of his pieces were, thieved and then sold.
Also worth mentioning the excellent soundtrack to this film as well, by Eberhard Schoner, who I didn't know, but started off like with this kind of solo saxophone piece, I guess, which I thought, oh, this is nice, and then it expands a few more instruments. So I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be primarily a jazz score and a good one. But no, it's quite a bunch of different styles. There's all this kind of synthly noodling stuff. There's this great little ditty playing. You must have noticed this probably jumped out. There's a scene where he enters a room and when he's going to be seduced by the other guy's wife, and they're listening to like some record on the gramophone, and it's like, what the fuck are they listening to? It sounds like some weird, like someone playing some kind of Wurlitzer organ tune on a synthesizer. It's just there's a lot of very bizarre, interesting, and such a wide, and like a cross-pollinating lots of different genres, and there's things with like seems to be drones and singing bowls, and I'd love to get a soundtrack for this.
Yeah. Although not of the main musical number, which was that in the book, that like that scene where they go to the playhouse or to the theater. I remember
there's a guy with the piano and people doing well,
everyone's doing their own thing. Like,
it's interesting. So this is something, I think this is an interesting example of what they tried to do with this film was, right, okay, so we can't do all that other stuff because, well, the technology hasn't been invented yet, and we don't have billions of dollars, and so many reasons we can't, and you wouldn't be able to show it anywhere in the world.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes.
So they kind of went the route of a slightly more, well, let's have some casual nudity and people doing weird avant-garde stuff in a room and just be, and it's just on that tipping, but it's as annoying as it should be. But it's not like it doesn't tip over into this is just pretentious.
Yes.
Nonsense, just kind of masquerading as trying to fill in for something else that they can't do that's in the book, right? It's kind of gets the tone just right. And there's like a guy with fake arms being crucified, and some of the people putting on a shit play, and a guy playing the piano, and some
the one
man stabbing.
I was gonna say the old fella stabbing the giant photograph and cutting it up of the woman, like really enthusiastically. And it does.
There's a hockey team as well in the middle of it.
Right.
It's and a man yelling "cock."
Yes. From the little the whatever that is at the front of a theater where you feed lines to the actors. He's just screaming.
He reminded me of the Uncle Sam from the Shark rip-off film.
Oh right, yes.
Which we talked about, yes. See former film crack for details. So they kind of, that stands in to a certain extent, but and man, this is a difficult film to talk. I tried writing about this film and it was really difficult.
Well, because it's that strange, in some ways it is as strange as the book, and it lacks that kind of, I mean, I guess what's interesting to me is what they changed and where they changed it. One of the things I felt was that the lead character in the movie is a little more active. He's a little bit more forceful in some ways, like in the later parts of the story, whereas I feel like the entropy sets in with him, like after his wife dies in the book, he just reacts to what's going on. He seldom is a force of action in the story, right?
Right. And
he certainly doesn't take up with other women, right? That's not, unless I'm wrong, I don't remember him ever.
No, woman just tried to seduce him. Well, more than that, he's not, because in the book, the fascinating thing about the book as well is there's a great scene which is just so wonderfully, honestly written in a way that you sound like such a dick if you claim you can relate to it in any way at all, but also you're a liar if you can't. There's that whole scene where his wife is just died, right? And there's a woman trying to seduce him, and like in the blink of an eye, he goes from mourning into not just allowing himself to be seduced, but we hear his internal monologue, like about so you're just another one of these, and he's talking about how he's going to talk her into bed, basically. and it's just like it's on a dime, like, and I find that fascinating because it's something you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to mention it, you know, and it's true. You can, you know, you can have both
right
thoughts in your head at the same time, right? You can mourn and be a predatory kind of seducer at the same time. This is entirely possible, but it's something very rarely in any kind of art form. You always seem to have to be in one mood or the other.
Yes. Yeah.
You're not allowed to.
So maybe I'm
contradictory.
I am remembering that now, but I guess I feel like that he has this kind of this woman that he seems to sort of follow in some way, right. Even before his wife dies in the movie, which is not, she's not really a feature of the book.
Well, she is, but she's also, they've in the book she's a character who's in the film, but they've separated out the dream girl and because it's the wife, isn't it, in the book who tries to seduce him. In this, she's the one, because if you remember throughout the book, there's stories of the whole town having their way with her as well, right? Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to remember. There's so much stuff happens in the book. So
the other thing that is definitely I think it's an addition. I don't remember it happening in the book. Is the whole thing quite early in the movie? He has this kind of jarring moment where everyone's kind of running around, freaking out, and this horse comes galloping down the cobbled street with this body on the back of it, wrapped in kind of cloth. Yeah. And then quite a bit later on in the story, when his wife is, and that's interesting, she's not actually dead at that point in the movie. She's still alive.
In bandages or muslin or something, right?
Yes. Well, in cotton, because then what became clear to me is what's going on, because they hoist her up into this tree, and it's a cocoon.
Right. That's amazing.
With a bunch of other cocoons hanging up in this tree.
That's an amazing scene, and that's the strong suit of this. That's how it avoids the trap of, like we said, just random noisy people doing senseless shit with their clothes off, standing in for something else. Is the fact that there is also amazing imagery, like that cocoon. There's like one very brief scene, which I suppose is an allusion to the Sea of Blood, where I guess it's red clay or something, and there's like an old woman trying to wash something in the middle of the street, and is that blood? Or
I read it as blood, like the entire square is just full of it.
And there's this whole thing with living statues as well, very briefly, which is a great, again, if you can get away with living statues and you're not annoying me, because that's just a hair's width away from mine, which is of course the devil's business. So the fact that I can go with that says a lot for this film, and so the interesting thing, the American in this film is played by a black man. It's a black actor. Yes, this is kind of interesting. Hercules Bell, right? It's played by a black man.
Yes,
he's much. There's much. Okay, so this is the sorry, I'm tying myself up in it because it's difficult. So the one thing I wanted to say, what did you think about this then? So, I was wondering about. So I loved the book, and I also ended up loving the film as well. Although the film slowly grew, it's like a cumulative thing. Like until about halfway through, I wasn't quite sure whether I was digging the film or not, because I was invariably comparing it to the book as well, right? But in the end, I figured that watching the film right after the book actually does the film a big favor, because I was at least aware of. So, for instance, the American Hercules Bell character is in the film, but you hardly see him at all. He has like one or two scenes, and then at the end, suddenly. So I was wondering.
He does not turn into a gigantic monster who then turns into a giant penis that then crawls under the ground, sadly.
Does this film actually make any sense at all if you haven't just read it? Because I was thinking,
I would think
the film, if you'd have just come cold into this film, would you still have enjoyed it? Because at least I knew what it was trying to do. So then I could fill in the gaps, and I could appreciate the film as an extension of the book, or as a version of it, or something like that. But I was trying to imagine, if I'd have seen Dream City and wasn't aware of the book, would I have still enjoyed it as much, or would I actually actively have despised it? Because it would have just seemed like totally random nonsense. but then again, it might still survive because, like you said, because of some of those great images, like the cocoon trees. And what do you think?
Yeah, that, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, it's off kilter enough and strange enough that I think it would have held my interest, you know.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if I would have rated it, or if I just would have thought it was gibberish. Whereas, having just read the book, it kind of anchors it. And so, yeah, and so the other thing that struck me as really interesting is, so it's in the book. So basically, when Patera comes out and he's torn, when they discover he's a
he's literally a straw man,
torn to pieces, which reminded me of that scene in the Monkeys film Head, right, where they're playing on stage and they turn out to be robots, and their fans, the female fans, just rip them to bits. Right? But it's interesting that Hercules Bell instigates that in the film, right? He chucks a rock at it, and I was thinking something that wouldn't have been the case in the book because it would have been a decade in the future. But this film, like 50 odd years later, this whole scene in the square really made me think of the assassination of Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah.
And also then made me go back to the book, and I was thinking that whole end section, there's something about Europe being torn apart, this world war as well, which is pressured in the book, but then in the film is so. I don't know, it just seems to me you should read the book and watch the film together for maximum kind of enjoyment. And
that makes sense, because Hercules in the movie does remind me more of like a radical, like a radical Marxist or a radical anarchist, or like it was more about bringing down this dictatorship as opposed to his knee-jerk, like, just I don't like the old-fashionedness of all of this, like, you know, it's more that progress versus the old ways, the traditional ways.
Well, also, like you said, he seems more of a radical, whereas when I was reading the book, the version of the American in that seemed more like a
capitalist.
Yeah, like a Klaus Vanderbilt kind of character.
Yeah, exactly.
Like bringing his railroad in or something like that.
That's totally how I read it, but I wondered, did that actor, is he in a bunch of Fassbinder movies? Or am I imagining that?
I don't know. I don't know.
I thought I recognized him, but I wondered if if that's where I recognized him from. But maybe not. Anyway, that's to look up for another time.
My key subtitle takeaway as well: man wasn't made to bear freedom. I think that kind of says it all. So you mentioned the explosive, and this floored me as well, and I was slightly alarmed. So there's a whole bunch of I guess demolitions or explosions with these, and they're obviously real old, these old European buildings just being blown to smithereens. And I was like, and it doesn't, regardless of if it was some kind of stock footage that was used, or if they blew all this shit up for the film, or regardless of what actually, because I was trying to figure it out, and again, like the book, this is a film I'll watch again and again, I think, to try and figure it out. But it's so seamlessly integrated, like it really seems perilous, isn't it? Like it's so well edited, you really do think these actors are in there with collapsing rubble, and it's and I mean, I know 1973 Prague, you could probably get away with doing a lot of shit that you certainly wouldn't be able to get away with now. But and I tried looking it up, and there is a making of Traumstad. I think it's a short film, but I couldn't find it on YouTube or anything. Even if it was in German without subtitles, I was thinking it would be worth a look to see if you could see any behind the scenes footage of all this. But I'm really curious as to how they pull this.
There was moments where like there'd be like a row housing, and it was just like coming down in a way that I didn't even understand, because there wasn't like the explosions you expect or the dust. It just seemed like it was just falling
like a controlled demolition, right? But do they even do controlled demolitions on like these kind of small houses, or did they do that for the film? I freeze framed. I went back and I thought potentially, if it's really well done, some of it could be miniatures. But I don't think it is miniature.
It didn't look like it.
No. So it's kind of extraordinary that they blew part of Prague, or got stock footage of Prague being blown up somewhere. Or it might not be. I know some of it Prague and some other bits, other parts of the Czech Republic, right, around that area. But holy fuck,
it's also very well done. The kind of, there is this like seamlessness, like from when they run out of the city into the outside landscape, which looks like, you know, like Afghanistan or wherever, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then back in again, and you just believe it, like in that dream way. You're just like, yeah, sure, that's what it's like outside.
Yeah. No, it's a really, I mean, as much as they had to change it, and I certainly understand why they did that. I mean, it's a great, that's the thing. It's a great book. I can't believe I'd never seen before. But you know, there's a lot of great books I haven't seen. But in terms of like cult movie material, I really couldn't believe I'd never seen this before.
Yeah.
Or heard of it. Or even, I don't think it really, it might, in the German speaking world, maybe it does. I don't know. But certainly in the English speaking world, this isn't a major cult film.
Nope.
I'm not aware of it. It fucking should be.
Yes.
You know, if you're fascinated in that period, if you like your, if you like your Jodorowsky, and if you like your Werner Herzog, and you know, and you like this era of filmmaking, where you know it's all, you know,
and your late Buñuel as well. I mean, any of that sort of surrealist stuff,
but pre kind of blockbuster, kind of big or reasonably big budget art house films shot on location, and you know, just it's just a spectacle of a film, right? Highly recommend the book, the film,
the movie, and the art.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
I would say that's the easy thing to do, is to just go do a Google search right now.
I am gonna get myself a book. I think I need a KUBIN book.
Yeah, the one of the crab and the little floating babies is really weird, and there's I mean, they're all great. And it's funny, Jen mentioned that there's a Australian artist called Sean Tan.
Okay.
And he did a book called quite an amazing graphic novel, actually, called and you know what, the more I think about it, actually, especially this, The Arrival by Sean Tan, which is a wordless graphic novel. It's entirely images, and it's all about basically immigrating, but it's done in this magic realist, surrealist way.
Okay.
With all these weird little monsters and stuff that are kind of just, and you slowly just get used to it, like, because you're getting used to this new world. Yeah, I would be surprised if Sean Tan, because his art actually looks like some of this, particularly that book. Okay.
So there we go. I mean, the highest of recommendations. All round.
Lots of fun, some great craziness, some just truly like arresting images. Just awesome.
Yes.
Thank you, friend Johannes.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes. Currently showing in posters in Shinjuku Station as well, because he's in a new coffee commercial. And he sent me photos of big poster frame blow-ups from the commercial adorning Shinjuku Station. So awesome. Yes, literally hundreds of thousands of people, commuters, are seeing Johannes Schoner's face every morning on their way to work and on the way to work. Right. All right. Signing off. Next time then. Bye-bye.